to be able to have a person listen to the truth you want to say, you've got to earn it by the grace. Because none of us who just get truth,
that's good,
without the grace, like it. Sometimes we feel judged, or we feel preached at, or we feel condemned, or we feel not heard. But if you've got the grace, they're much more open to saying, I'll listen to you because you earned it. We have to earn it.
Welcome to the Christian Leader Made Simple podcast. I really hope this episode helps you learn and master the skills you need to grow your leadership effectiveness and enjoyment. Be sure to hit the subscribe button to get notified as soon as I post a new session so you don't miss a single episode. I'd also greatly appreciate any reviews, likes, and shares that you can give me. It just helps me extend my reach to more people. So leaders, I know just how frustrating it can feel when you're in the weeds of work or ministry and life is chaotic, you're struggling to feel effective, and you're just not enjoying leadership as much as you could be. And so to help you, after many years of leadership and executive coaching, I've developed a framework called the Christian Leader Blueprint that'll guide you to find clarity in your life and leadership. It'll help you gain a better rhythm of life. It'll help you see yourself more clearly, to leverage your strengths, and you'll produce more productive relationships. It's a step-by-step guide to leadership transformation. And I have that in two formats now. I have a free short guide that you can find on ryanfranklin.org, and I have a book, The Christian Leader Blueprint. And you can find that in any format, including an audiobook, wherever you buy your books. I have a few more things on my website that you may be interested in, so just head on over to ryanfranklin.org and check it all out. And now, let's get to our session.
Welcome to the Christian Leader Made Simple podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Franklin, and today we have a special guest that I have longed to interview for a very long time. And it's only my fault that we haven't done this sooner. But today we have with us the one and only Dr. John Townsend, and many of you know him from his books, but just in case there's some of you that don't, let me share a little bit of his bio. Dr. Townsend is a well-known psychologist, leadership consultant, and New York Times best-selling author who has greatly influenced how I personally think about relationships and leaderships through many of his books and teachings. He's written over 30 books, and he sold over 10 million copies. But he's most widely known for his amazing series called Boundaries. He's the founder and operator of Townsend Institute for Leadership and Counseling, which offers graduate programs in counseling, executive coaching and consulting, and leadership. And as a psychologist and a leadership consultant, John has spent decades coaching leaders and business owners and pastors on how to grow in both their personal and professional lives. And I have to admit, I'm a little bit starstruck today. This is a man that I have greatly admired from a distance most of my life, and he has drastically improved my relational life through his books and teachings over the years. So if I fumble with my words a little bit today, you're just going to have to give me a little bit of grace. I'm so honored to have him on the show today to discuss a book that he wrote just a few years ago, but is drastically changing lives. Actually just did a small group, just finished it up this past Sunday. And the book is called People Fuel, which helps us dive into the power of relationships and leadership. So Dr. Townsend, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ryan. Glad to be here.
You know, one of my bucket list items was sitting down with Dr. John Townsend and drinking a cup of coffee. So I brought my coffee with me and talking about relational nutrients. This is such an honor.
Thank you. It's really fun to be here already.
You know, I had the privilege of attending your school, Townsend Institute, and I'd love to just kind of jump into that right off the bat and you share with the audience. I've had many people that have been interested in it. I think I've had 10 people, right at 10 people who have actually attended Townsend Institute from my network of people that listen to the podcast and in my coaching services. But it is a phenomenal school. I loved it. It changed my life. Can you just share what that is, what Townsend Institute actually is?
Sure. Thanks. We have a fully accredited graduate program in 3 programs. The first one is executive coaching consulting. The second one is in counseling, and the third one is in organizational leadership. And there's different levels of achievement a person can have. Some people may just say, I'd just like a credential, and that's fine. You can get a master's at any of those 3. And now we have a PhD in counseling. And as a matter of fact, I don't know if I told you this, Ryan, but recently Forbes magazine made our PhD in counseling the #1 online PhD counseling degree
Wow.
ever. And that wasn't among the Christian ones, but just Forbes in general. And so what we do is we have a methodology where basically online with 1 or 2 little trips to the beautiful campus of Concordia University, Irvine, California, where we are. But basically, we've got all of the accreditations needed for a person to have a great career and a valid degree. And we teach kind of like the skill part of like leadership and coaching and counseling, but also the people part, like that. How do you relate differently? Because sooner or later, it's going to be coming down to you as a person or not a person, no matter what your skills are. And people are getting great jobs and great opportunities, like yourself. You're a graduate we're very impressed with, and we want to stay connected to you forever.
Well, thank you so much. And I want to stay connected to you guys forever. In fact, I'm waiting on you guys to do a doctorate in leadership of some sort.
It's on the boards.
I can't wait. I've been staying in touch with Dr. Gilbert to just waiting on that to happen. So we're covering People Fuel today, which I have to say is not my favorite book of all time. It's my second favorite book. My favorite book is this one right here.
Hiding from Love.
Hiding from Love. Phenomenal book. It's only available on paperback. I'd love for you to do an Audible version of that at some point, or at least a Kindle. But it is one of my it is my top book. I've worn this thing out. I've probably read it 7 or 8 times over the last 4 or 5 years, and it has changed my life.
I'm glad it was helpful, Ryan.
It really was. And but the book that we're talking about today is of course People Fuel, which is probably a little more practical for the average person. It works with anyone actually, and everyone needs to read it. And so to kick us off with People Fuel, you've got a lot of scripture in here, and it's very much biblically based. What does the Bible say about relationships and leadership, and how do you integrate the teachings of the Bible into the principles that we read in People Fuel?
Well, yes, it's kind of what the content of the book is about. Like you said, I wanted something to be practical about relationships, because healthy people, they increase their gain relationships and they sort of like decrease their drain relationships. I wanted to show how to do that. So we've got the practical part. We've also got the science part. There's a lot of neuroscience there, the science of the brain and how we're resilient, how we make challenges and how we achieve goals. But I also wanted to have a lot of the Bible in it, because basically it all started with the Bible. Every good neuropsych and clinical and coaching research piece that I've ever read that was well done, you can find a passage on it in the Bible. The Bible started it all. And so I see it as one of those cases where science bends its knee to the Bible. And so I love science, but I also see that it came from the scriptures. And when we say, what does the scripture say about relationships? It says a lot of things. But some of the most important things, I think, are that we have what I would call the vertical relationship with God. That's God and the Bible and the Holy Spirit and Jesus and prayer. And that's where we get so much grace and truth and help and support to lead well, to run our families well, to be healthy people. That vertical dimension is important. But what a lot of people miss, Ryan, is that the Bible also teaches a horizontal view of where we get the support we need, the wisdom we need, the care we need, the love we need. And that horizontal part is people. For example, if you go back to Genesis 2, it says it's not good that we be alone. And that was God speaking to Adam. And a lot of people say, yeah, that's a marriage verse. Well, it includes marriage, but it includes any kind of relationship. God was just saying, this sounds so strange, but it's just the way it is. God was saying, I'm going to create a system in which I am insufficient. I'll make myself insufficient in everything. I'm going to give you an indirect way to get my love and grace that's not just vertical. Huge, huge passage. And then you go to, Matthew 26, where Jesus is on the mount and he's sweating great drops of blood and he's in a lot of torment, and he turns around to Peter, James, and John and says, my soul is very distressed. And here's God talking to the Father, but he still needs people around him. And there's tons and tons of verses about that, where when we learn that relationships, I believe that the Bible and the science teach, relationships are the number one way we lead well and succeed and stay healthy. You can't overstate it.
Yeah, there's over 60 scriptures in the Bible that are one another scriptures and speaks of needing one another in our lives. And it's definitely an intricate part of being a disciple of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
So in People Fuel, you talk about relational nutrients. Can you explain what relational nutrients actually are and how they relate to our leadership health?
Sure. I was trying to figure a way to let people know practically and specifically, how can you build someone up? Maybe it could be your child, it could be your spouse, it could be an employee of yours, but somebody you care about. How can you build them up specifically? Because you use words like encourage, and what does that mean? Do you pat somebody in the back and say, go for it? Well, I don't know. But I wanted something a little more specific. And I started thinking about the concept of bionutrients, Ryan. We're all trying to be healthy these days and take our supplements and, work out right and sleep right. And that's all great science. And supplements are a big part of it. And if you don't have enough iron in your, whatever you take every day, you're going to probably have a blood problem. If you don't have enough calcium, you probably have a bone problem. They're necessary. So I thought that's the way that I see relationships handled, is that we have to transfer these nutrients, and that's why they're called relational nutrients instead of bionutrients, to each other to give us the health we need. But they're not given in a capsule form. They're given in a conversation, a text, a lunch, a dinner, a phone call, where we transfer the good things we need and we receive the good things we need so that we can have great lives.
Yeah. Well, with relational nutrients, you do an amazing job of categorizing these into 4 quadrants. I love the way that you categorize them. Can you explain, the quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4 and how that all works?
Yeah, sure. That's sort of how it just broke down really as I was studying it, Ryan. There are 4 quadrants, as you said, and there are probably 22 nutrients. Mm-hmm. And they're spread out 5 or 6 in each quadrant. But the first quadrant is called be present, Present, be present with one another. In other words, shut up and listen. Sometimes as leaders, we talk too much and we've got all these nuggets, but sometimes when a person's suffering and they're what we would call in the well of being overwhelmed or discouraged or feeling like a loser or feeling like they've got imposter syndrome, sometimes we feel like a need to tell them a lot of words and they're not listening. What they do need is for us to be actively involved in being there emotionally, being there for them, letting them know we're on their side, and just tell them, I want to hear it, and that you're willing to listen to the hard stuff without giving tons of advice. And so be present. Of all those 4, when I work with leaders, that's the number one that I have to really drill down on, because leaders are kind of trained more to talk than to listen, and it works against them. So learn that skill. Like if you go to Job chapter 2, it says that he had lost everything, right? He was in deep suffering. And it said his 3 friends sat with him and did not speak a word to him for 7 days and 7 nights, for they knew his grief was very great. Now we know that that's the Jewish Shiva. But it's sometimes the best thing you can do is to totally understand someone's feelings and say things like, how are you feeling about that? That sounds overwhelming. Tell me more about that. That's being present. The second one is a little different. It's called convey the good. Sometimes people just need, I call it a little relational Prozac, just to know that you care about them. And so, a good friend of ours, Ken Blanchard, he's a fellow that teaches at the Institute. He also always said, if you see it, say it. And so if you see somebody, walking down the hall and you just notice they're handling something well, just say, by the way, that was a tough meeting you were in and you had some difficult things to do. Just well done. Or saying to your kid, I love the way that you didn't do really well in the game, but I loved your heart that you tried your best. People will remember that, especially from what I call the leadership megaphone. They will, because of who you are, if you're a leader, they'll remember it for the rest of their lives that you said that. So convey the good when people need it. People need hope and respect, and they need affirmation. The third one has to do with what's just called, deliver reality, deliver what's real, what's true. And that means sometimes we need kind of a Gandalf figure, the guy in Lord of the Rings with a long beard, because he had wisdom and ways to look at things that nobody else said. And sometimes people need a strategy that they've never had. Sometimes they need a plan that they hadn't thought of. Sometimes they need to understand why. Why is this happening in my business right now? Why is this happening in my sales? Why is this happening in my family? And they need somebody who has wisdom to say, well, because I saw what happened in the dynamic and the conversations you've been having with these people, and this is what went on, and here's how we can help you. They kind of go underneath to the why. And also, they provide personal feedback. So just delivering great reality can be a huge, huge, huge change maker in somebody's organization and family. And the fourth one is call to action. And that's kind of the butt kicker one. Like, we're not just supposed to take these nutrients and say, thank you very much, give me more. Sooner or later, we've got to do something with it. We've got a CTA. We've got to say, now what are you going to do? We found out from neuroscience, Ryan, if you do some action on something you've heard, whether it be a podcast like yours or something else, read a book, if you do an action, it's likely to stay with you the rest of your life. If you don't do anything about it, but just kind of think about it and don't take an action, the brain just goes, not that important. You can lose it in 3 months. So what are the calls to action? What's a challenge you can do? What's a plan you can have? What's a strategy you can follow? And that makes all the difference. Now, if you can think about those 4 categories, being present, delivering the good things, bringing reality, and the call to action, the first 2 are kind of more on the grace end of being there for somebody with some truth, but mainly about just totally being there with somebody. The last 2 are more about the truth. Here's some information. Here's some techniques, or here's some data you might need. And so all of our nutrients are some combination of a certain amount of grace a person needs and a certain amount of reality or data or truth they need.
I have found in my life especially, but I've also found it in many others, that we are tempted to go straight to the quadrant 3 and 4 of providing reality, a call to action. And in the last few years, through Townsend Institute, just learning how to really slow down and be present with someone, or convey the good, and eventually get to provide reality and a call to action. But just slowing down and giving those quadrant 1 and 2 nutrients has been a game changer with my life and the way that I interact with leaders in our church and whatnot. Any thoughts on how leaders can use these quadrants when they're interacting with others?
Yeah. One is, once you familiarize yourself with them, they're in the book, as you said, Ryan, familiarize and learn a little bit about them. I'm a big believer in kind of that walking around management part of coaches and leaders, where you're just around people and you use these opportunities to see them. And it's really important. You'll find out which one they need by asking them how they're doing. Well, isn't that revelatory? Ask them how they're doing, but sometimes we think we know. And many times, especially if you're an important person in their life, if you're a significant person, how they're doing, they'll say, I'm great. And then you listen a while, then you say, so how are you really doing? They may say, yeah, well, one of my kids is sick, or I really screwed up on the Smith account. I don't know what I'm doing. And you get the reality. And then you kind of know, all right, is this the time to give them 4 steps to fix that? Probably not. Not if it's the first time they brought it up. This is the time to begin. You cannot lose. You cannot lose by defaulting to quadrant 1. It may not be where you end, but I promise you, nobody's going to say, well, you listened to me and cared about me at a very deep level. That was useless. Nobody's going to do that. They're going to say, that made a difference. Usually I get 18, suggestions by now. So start by there, default to that. And then you'll find out, some people will go, I really needed to hear that. And that helped so much. And actually, you've helped me solve my problem. I'm good. Some people will say, you understand me, and not many people do. So then what would I do about so-and-so? And they will lead you to another one, because it kind of like they settled down, they got listened to, they felt connected, they're not alone. And then they're going, I do have some problems to talk about, but kind of listen to them and see what they need next.
Yeah. I love the way that you put that, as quadrant 1 and 2 is grace, quadrant 3 and 4 is more truth. And Scripture many times speaks of grace and truth, but it always speaks of it in that order. Mm-hmm. It's never truth and grace. It's always truth and it's always grace and truth. Mm-hmm. Even Jesus, in I think it was John 1:14, talks about grace and truth, and that was something that drastically impacted the way that I interact in pastoral counseling and with leaders, with my family, with my wife. It was a huge difference maker with me.
I studied that passage a long time, Ryan, and realized, because, the order is important in the Greek. I mean, the syntax is important. And I finally think I figured it out, was to be able to have a person listen to the truth you want to say, you've got to earn it by the grace. Because none of us who just get truth,
that's good,
without the grace, like it. Sometimes we feel judged, or we feel preached at, or we feel condemned, or we feel not heard. But if you've got the grace, they're much more open to saying, I'll listen to you because you earned it. We have to earn it.
So before we continue on with the podcast, this episode is brought to you by Christian Leader Community Coaching. Are you a Christian leader who is overwhelmed by the complexity of trying to figure out how to grow your team? I want to introduce to you our Christian Leader Community Coaching program. We have an easy-to-use online platform that has a full archive of courses, supportive community, live group coaching, and elements that are customizable specifically for your team. And I've personally seen the quick and enormous impact that it can have on a team of leaders who are focused together on learning and mastering the skills needed to grow their leadership effectiveness and enjoyment. And we want to be a part of that with you. We want to help you create and implement a plan. The community is very much affordable, but I would say that you can't afford not to have focused growth within your team. Your results heavily depend on it. So don't wait any longer. Let's do this together. Go to ryanfranklin.org and join Christian Leader Community Coaching today. I look forward to seeing you and your team inside the community. And now, back to our podcast.
That's really good. So, a lot of people would read this book through the lens of how I can minister better to others. But you talk in this book very, very vividly about the fact that we need to receive. You need. Dr. John Townsend needs to receive these nutrients, not just give. Why do you say that that's so important?
Well, a couple of reasons. One is you find all over the Bible. You look at 2 Corinthians 1, comfort one another with the comfort you've been comforted. Well, if you're the comforter and you haven't been comforted, so how do you give what you've never experienced? But also because I see it playing out so much as not only as in leadership and coaching, but also as a psychologist, in seeing a thing called compassion fatigue, burnout. When people learn to give and give and give, but they don't know how to receive because they feel like it's being selfish, what happens is they shorten their impact years, they shorten their lifespan sometimes, they shorten their effectiveness gets shortened. So it just kind of makes sense that if you're going to provide a fountain of truth and care and love, where are you getting it? And then I'll have a lot of the Christian leaders I work with will say, well, I get it from God. And I say, well, absolutely. And who else? And they'll say, my spouse. I'll say, great, we need a great spouse. And I'll say, where else? And they'll say, my Labrador Retriever, Max. And I'll say, so that's your team? Yeah, that's my team. It's God, my spouse, and Max. And I'll go, let me break that down a little bit. So God, absolutely, he is the source of all. And Max, well, he's genetically engineered to lick you and accept you because he doesn't eat otherwise. So that's sort of a mulligan, really. And I said, your spouse is probably overwhelmed. And a lot of times when the spouse is listening, she'll say, you need to listen to this guy. because I do love you and I want to hear all your hurts and hangups and failures, but I'm hearing too much now and you need a team. And so all of a sudden people will think, yeah, I do need something like that. But to back up to your point though, it was, here's where they finally realize they have needs, because they'll say the phrase, and I finally figured it out around the time I was writing the books. Well, I'm a leader and my people have needs, but I don't want to be a burden. And I would go, okay, yeah, you don't want to be a burden. And then I ran across Galatians 6 and it says, cast your burdens on one another, bear your burdens on one another that you fulfill the law of Christ. And I thought, I think that's something different than we've been saying. And I'll go to the person, I'll say, you know, this, you don't want to be a burden. No, I take burdens. I'm a leader. I'm a coach. I don't want to be a burden. I say, well, look at this Bible passage here. You're a burden. Get over it. Accept your burdenness. And they'll go through this kind of I don't know, they kind of go through a crisis of, I feel like a high need person and I'm going to drain everybody. I say, you're not that person. You're not going to drain everybody to death. But you got to get over the fact that, your needs are blessed. And if you're keeping people from taking your burdens, you're not letting them fulfill the law of Christ, which is the law of love. And they'll go away. I'll give them a homework assignment as a coach. So I want you to go to 3 people besides spouse and dog and God and say something like, can we have lunch? And I need to talk about some struggle, maybe something with my kid or with my income or with my new job or whatever, just a little struggle, and see what happens. And they'll go in kind of anxious, like, oh, they're going to tell me I'm a high need person, high maintenance. And they'll come back and they'll go, you won't believe what happened. I talked to Jim, my buddy, and he said, I am more than happy to listen to you. You have no idea that most of the time in our relationship, you are such a blessing to me. And for me to have the privilege of giving back, just listening, being there, caring about you, praying for you, giving wisdom, it is an awesome thing. And they'll come back with their minds blown because they did not realize they were wired to have needs. And if you want to be a world changer, you got to get those needs met.
Yeah. We need to be needy.
We need to be needy. Get over it.
That's right. That's right. So I look at my relational nutrients sort of as a tank, like an air cylinder that would be, either empty or full or moderately full. I try to keep my relational tank moderately full with my life team, as you've taught me. Mm-hmm. But some relationships are fueling to us, and then some are draining to us. Mm-hmm. And you talk about this a little bit in your book. Can you help us understand how we can assess whether they're fueling or draining to us? Yeah.
After you had an hour with them, do you feel like winning the world, or do you feel like taking a nap? That's a quick and dirty way to do it, Ryan.
Yeah.
I have a concept in the Bible. I have a concept in the book called the 7 C's to help clarify this for people, that there are these levels of gain versus drain, depending on the kind of person they are, to make it easy for somebody to kind of think through, where am I putting my time, my strokes? And by the way, having people in your life that drain you is not all bad. If you've got a 6-month-old baby, that baby's going to drain you, and they should. Their job is draining us until they've grown up a little bit. So drains aren't always bad, but it's the way the drains are done. Now, and I'll explain that. The 7 C's start with the topmost nutrient-rich environment, and they end up with the most nutrient drain. The top one is what I call coaches. And coaches is anybody who has a specialty that's good to conveying that. It could be executive coach, music coach. It could be a sports coach. It could be a family coach. It could be a spiritual director, a counselor. But they have no need for you to be their buddy, because this is what they do, and their whole time is spent to help you develop. That's a high nutrient type of relationship. The second one is what we would just call basically our comrades, like our comrades in arms. And this is the life team that you referred to that I talk about in the book. This is 3 to 7, sometimes up to 10 people who know it all about you, care about you, would never judge you, but they want to help you and tell you the truth and grow together with you. And those are invaluable. That's another high nutrient dense type of relationship. The third one is what I just call casuals. And those are those people, maybe your next door neighbor, or somebody you your kids all play soccer together and you got to know them. They're nice people, or somebody you like at church, but you don't see them a lot, don't go very deep, but they're just positive, kind people. And they can lighten your load up for the day. And sometimes that leads to them being a farm team where you kind of think maybe they need to be on my committed life team because they're so good for me. That's the next level. The next level is colleagues. And now you can't always pick the people you work with, not all the time, but I can tell you the research says that the best, as much as you can get involved in it, the ones that are good at relationships and they're competent in what they do and they work well on teams, stay around those people. Good relationally, good competency-wise, and work well on teams. They'll make your day better. Then you go down to the next level. Now I want to move to a little more of the drain, but it's not a bad drain. And that's what the C called care, C-A-R-E, care. Those are the people who are just without. I mean, they don't have what they need. Anything from, someone in a developing country, some ministry or some organization that doesn't have any kind of resources like we have in the States, and they need your help and your being there and your wisdom and your funding and your time. Or maybe some business associate who is younger than you or maybe new in your business and says, I don't know how to do what you do. You've been to places, you've achieved so-and-so in terms of revenue and stature, and can you mentor me? That's another kind of a care relationship. Sometimes it's just somebody in your life is having a hard time. But we're all supposed to care. I mean, Jesus said, the poor you'll always have with you. We have a responsibility. Or as the great prophet Stan Lee, who wrote Spider-Man, said, with great power comes great responsibility. We have a responsibility. Yet at the same time, we have to realize that we can't do it all. And then the next level is chronic. Now, this is a little tougher one. Now, chronic has to do with someone who has unending problems and unending crises and losing jobs and horrible relational conflicts and family things and health things. And so many of them, they just don't learn the lessons they need to learn about life. They're not bad people. They're not mean people. They have what I would call a flat learning curve. I mean, if you've tried to mentor a chronic and time after time you're spending your Saturday morning with them instead of seeing your kids play soccer, but, and you give them, advice and you give them a Bible verse and you pray for them and then they go out and they ruin their lives again and again because they got a flat learning curve. Now, you and I both have Southern roots and in the South, we call that, bless their hearts. Just how's Sam doing? Well, bless his heart. We know what we're going to say about, he just messed up again. And what I found out about leaders and coaches and high capacity people, Ryan, is that most of the time we get tied up there. Most of our energy kind of goes down that drain, and we've got to learn how to limit that because it limits all the things we can do. Because we're compassionate, we want to help, but some people you have to have a few more limits and less availability with sometimes. And then the seventh one is the darkest. It's called basically contaminants. It's people that make your life worse. And they're not just foolish people. They're bad people. I believe that there's evil in the world. I wish I didn't, but I do. And these are people who are envy-based, and they don't like to see successful people. And so they tear up organizations and nonprofits and churches and families, and they can tear you up too. And you have to have very severe limits with them. Do not spend too much time with a contaminant because they have deep, deep character pathologies that really are looking to make themselves feel better when others do worse. Now, here the thing about it is, you got a podcast for people that want to change the world and want to make an impact. Most of us are bottom heavy. I don't mean physically, but bottom heavy in terms of so many drains. And everybody always says, okay, I got to start pruning those back. No, not yet. The best advice I can give if you want to right size this is start building up your coaches, the ones you can have. And Ryan knows this. Coaches are worth about 3x what they cost us. That's what the research says. So get more of that going in whatever. I've got several coaches for different parts of my life. But get that going and also get that team together of comrades. And then you'll have the wherewithal and the strength and the discretion to kind of figure, now where do I prune back? And that's how you get a balanced life and along with the gains from the drains.
Absolutely. So there's people listening right now that say, okay, John, you got me. I'm convinced. Where do they start in practical steps in building a network of fueling relationships? What does that actually look like?
Well, let's start at the top again. Where's the biggest need? Some people may say, well, I need an executive coach. Well, you're on this podcast, so get a hold of him, right?
Yeah.
Or somebody he knows. So go with people who are trusted and just say, that's my need is business in some, this is a Christian business coaching format. This is not everything. This is like a deep dive into a triple specialty here. Or your need might be, I need help with my family. We're not functioning like we need to, or I need spiritual growth help, or I need an emotional help. So where is life? Look at it this way. Where is life not going on all 8 cylinders? And that's where you start looking for the help, and the help's there. The second thing, though, is to start working on that life team. And I've had people say, I don't know where to start. Do I just get on the phone, on the web and say, 1-800 find a friend? No, that's not a very safe thing to do. So what I always tell people, if you really don't know anybody in your life that has great capacities, in the book I talk about people who have lots of care, lots of truth. They can be vulnerable. Vulnerability is essential in this. They appreciate structure. They're not just random people. They have a kind of pretty much common values. Not every single value has to be the same, but common values. And they want to grow and these sorts of things. Well, what I had to put together a little test for that. What you do is you go to Microsoft Contacts, whether you're Apple or, PC. And you go through your contact list. Everybody's got, between 50 and 5,000 names in there. I did this on myself to see if it would work, and it does. And just go through and go, they would fit those criteria. They would help me grow, and they'd be mutual with me. It's not me fixing them or them fixing me. It's us fixing each other together. And you'll end up with a list of, 30 people. You have to kind of take it away the people that are currently in prison. Probably not a good idea, right? I've had people kind of question that. But you'll have some names. And then you take the top name and you just give them a phone call and say, hey, we haven't seen each other for a while. Can we grab lunch or coffee? And what you do in that conversation at lunch or coffee makes all the difference, because building a life team takes somewhere between 4 and 6 months. You have to be patient with the process. This is the first lunch of the first person. Yeah. And I've had CEOs of $1 billion corporations, and the guy took 5 months, but he says it's worth it. He's been doing this. He contacted me the other day. He's been doing it 10 years with the same people. It was worth the 6 months.
Yeah.
And you have a lunch and you say, how's life? But what you do is you take one vulnerable step, one little, not huge thing about awful childhood stuff. That's for later. But where you say, my daughter's acting out, or, I'm not happy where my returns are in my business, or, sometimes I watch too much TV or eat too much, whatever. A small vulnerable step. And one of 4 responses will tell you whether they get the next lunch to see if this is going to work. The first group will go, the weather here is amazing and I love the food. Well, Ryan, what are they telling you when they do that?
They're not interested.
I'm not interested, and you kind of freak me out talking about vulnerable stuff. Well, nice person, but not life team. The second person will say, okay, maybe your problem, maybe you said my teenage daughter's acting out. Your daughter's acting out? Yeah, she's acting out. Okay, first thing you do, there's 14 Bible verses I'm going to give you now. Do you hug your daughter, but you have to hug her morning and night? Also, do you give her a lot of freedom because she needs a certain amount of freedom? And do you give her good boundaries? You need boundaries. And you got to get her in a youth group. And do you have her in art? Art is very good. And how about sports? And, okay, Ryan, what are they telling you?
All truth and no grace.
All truth and no grace. And I am so freaked out about your vulnerability. It reminds me of my own. So I'll just be the advice monster. And that's what I'll do to stay safe. Nice person, not life team. Have lunch with them 3 times a year, fine. The third person will say, your daughter's acting out. Yeah. Huh. So are you really a Christian? Well, yeah, I'm a Christian. I'm not sure. Because you see, if you're really a Christian, you have kids that were just towing the line. And I think you need to think about your own spirituality, but it's probably because something's wrong inside you. What are they telling you? They're telling you I'm a judge. And I don't spend a lot of time with judgy people. So all those people, great, nice people, but not life team. Here's the fourth one. And this is the one that wins. The person stops and says, your daughter's acting out? Yeah, it's really scaring my wife and me, my husband and me. And the person stops eating, looks at you, leans forward and says, I'm so sorry. You got a great kid there. How's it feel? That's got to be tough. Can I pray for you? Tell me more about it. And they get in what we call the well of being overwhelmed. And you begin to go, they get me. That person gets the next lunch. And then you have a few more lunches like that. And by that time, after 2 or 3 lunches, they're probably sharing their story too, because so few people, especially in the leadership and coaching world, as you know, have this experience. And that's when you just make the offer and say, I'm getting pretty intentional about my self-improvement. And I need a few people that I feel like-minded with, that are safe and vulnerable. And I loved our lunches. And are you willing to get together on some regular basis, once a week, once every other week, once a month? And 95% of the time they'll go, I don't have this. I don't have this in my life. Totally, I'm in. And that's how you build it.
That's tremendous. That's tremendous. One thing that you have said in the past that I've heard you say that I just want to bring out is that Zoom is not as good as in person. It's sort of like eating a hamburger. In person is eating a steak. On Zoom or virtual means is like eating a hamburger. Both are nourishing, though. And I just want to encourage the audience, that could be virtual coffee on Zoom if you don't have somebody that's close by.
It's huge. In fact, what I found out, because I was kind of resistant at first a few years ago. Now I found out it just works. I'll be in a group of leaders around the world, and they'll say, we need to process some issues and we can't all fly in together. And so it'll get kind of, emotional. I mean, people talking about their families and losses of money and health. And because Zoom and the resolution capacities of the pixels and all that, and the sound is so clear, I'll be able to, as I'm watching these folks, say, Sam, I just saw a tear in your eye. Oh, what was that about? And then Bill in another country goes, I saw it too, and I want to understand it. So I'm a fan. I always tell people, well, do you want me to get you a person face to face who's a B-level person, or do you want an A-level person on Zoom? Okay, you got me. I want the A-level person. If you can get an A person locally, fine. But push comes to shove.
So a leader that loves what you're saying, wants to do this, has a list of people that they could do it with, but they just struggle with vulnerability. What could you say to help that person, that's feeling weak or exposed with vulnerability?
I would say I get it. We're all like that. I don't know any leaders who don't struggle with that at some level. So I would like to normalize that for you. But the second thing is, I'd give you a little homework assignment, is find somebody safe that you really feel safe. Maybe your spouse, or maybe somebody that, you're not really open with everybody, but is there one person in your life? And just say, I need to do a thing that this guy on Ryan's podcast said, to do a role play. And just role play opening up to that person, and that person, watch what they do. Watch how warm they are, and watch how welcoming they are, and watch how encouraging they are, and realize, okay, I just had an experience where I was terrified that I'd be rejected, or that I'm not going to do this right, or this isn't natural for me because I'm better with stats and numbers. But I said these things about some struggles, and I feel so alive inside. I feel so like better, and realize you're getting ready to do that with some more people. So a little beginning role play with a very safe person is the very best thing you can do.
So in other words, just jump in and try it.
Jump in and
see
try
what happens.
But not in the deep end, in the baby pool.
Yes, of course. I've got a couple of short concluding questions, but I just want to ask, is there anything else regarding People Fuel, this phenomenal book, that you would like to bring out? Anything?
Yeah, I would say that most people who are watching this podcast are on the higher capacity end of life, which is kind of a double-edged sword, and think about Jesus' words to the two sisters, Mary and Martha. A lot of us end up being Marthas, and we're just putting our act together, and we're organized and we're disciplined. You got to have organization. You got to have discipline. You got to be mission-minded. But it really helps to default out of that into you as a person with other people. Because the thing about it is, and this is kind of the great aha, is that people who are good not only with structure and task and strategy, but are also good with people in relationships, their success level is always enhanced. You might think this is a waste of time or I don't do it well. Let me go back to the numbers. Not true. All the research says you've got to make what they would call attachment-based behaviors, and it will win for you because that's how God made us.
Yeah. So good. That's so good. What's one ritual or routine that has helped you produce? You've produced so much in your life, so much, books and organizations and just success. What's one ritual or routine that's helped you do that?
Well, yeah, we're all busy. And there's kind of the have-tos in life. And I do the have-tos, I've got a marriage and a family, and I've got, self-help and health and all that stuff. Do the have-tos. But you have to make somewhere in line, you've got to make some white space in that calendar for the want-tos. People that create things don't do it just because they think they should. They've got to feel some passion for it. That's kind of what Proverbs 4:23 is about. It says, guard your heart, because that's where the issues of life come out. And all of us have, I don't know, Ryan's got a great book. It started with a passion, right? And so make space for that, because that's where God comes in and says, I'm going to change direction for you. There's somebody I want you to talk to that you've been thinking about, or there's a business I want you to start, or there's some difference in how you do church or whatever. But if we're never in that space of the white spaces, we're always doing the shoulds. And the should you have to, but make sure you got a few hours every week for the desire, the want-tos, the passions.
That's wonderful advice. So what's next in the life of John Townsend?
Well, we continue to have a lot of good times at the Institute that you're a grad of, and we're always developing that. I also have a pretty full, portfolio of coaching clients that I really enjoy, and that's just a lot of fun for me. But kind of the one thing that's taken time now is my first textbook. I've written all these books at a market level, but the Institute asked me to write a textbook on Christian counseling, more at a research and technical level. And so that requires a different way of writing and thinking. My books are sort of like, I sat down there with, Jim, the leader of this company, and then Sam, the leader of this company, and Susie over here. And we talked a while, and then we took a break, and then so-and-so opened up. But with a technical book, you can't be that informal. You have to say, well, there's 4 research studies that say this and this and this. But if you're going to get a grad degree, you need it. So I'm trying to learn to write at a different level now. So pray for me.
That's tremendous. I sure will. Absolutely. And I can't wait to get my hands on that book.
Thanks.
I'm sure it'll be a great resource. Well, Dr. Townsend, thank you so much for being willing to join us. I greatly appreciate your time today. If people want to learn more about Townsend Institute, of course, the People Feel book is anywhere you buy books, Amazon and different places. But if people want to learn more about Townsend Institute, where do they go to get that?
Just townsendinstitute.com. We're all over there, and the information, the website's really easy to negotiate and navigate where you want to go.
And I'd also like to mention drtownsend.com, I believe, has resources on coaching and TLPs, and which is Townsend Leadership Groups, tremendous groups. I've been a part of all of that as well.
We also have a new assessment, the TPRAT, Townsend Personal Relational Assessment Tool. In 5 to 7 minutes, you can find out where you are in terms of your internal wiring, what you need to work on, and that's getting really good results too.
Yeah, which is very intricately involved with this book, Hiding from Love.
You picked that up, huh?
And yes, it's this is sort of a part 1, and this is a part 2.
Well said.
And I love them both. It's my number. Literally, I've told this often. It's my number 1 and my number 2 book of all time.
Wow.
It's impacted my life that much.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Dr. Townsend.
Thanks, Ryan.
So this concludes our show today. My name is Ryan Franklin. Thank you so much for joining us on the Christian Leader Made Simple podcast.